G'day everyone, and welcome to the Foundations of Programming using JavaScript. So in this course we're going to go through a bunch of different things to get you up to speed with JavaScript. So first things first though, I just wanted to go over kind of just a quick history and context for JavaScript itself. You've probably heard JavaScript used a lot around creating web pages. And may not know exactly kind of how it fits into things like HTML or CSS. And so if we look at this structure here, you can see that HTML is the intended content of the website itself, and CSS is like what the presentation or how the page actually displays. So if you think of that, the words on the page are typically the HTML, and there's another file or another content type called CSS that talks about how the content of the page would actually be displayed. And so it might change the color or the background of the page and things like that, so that the page renders with a certain style. It's also another term for CSS is cascading style sheets. And then the third component, which is this course, is going to be about JavaScript. And JavaScript is really all of the code behind the page, or the interactivity. So JavaScript originally was created to make pages more interactive and kind of bring what we call client-side processing to the computer, so that the server wasn't having to do a round trip to do everything. And that might be for things like validating forms that you type. It might be for dynamic actions. When a button is clicked, you might have something that moves, or you may even in JavaScript have something that gets sent to the server just for that part of the page, rather than updating the entire page. So all of the kind of dynamic properties that happen locally are usually done with JavaScript. Now, that makes JavaScript kind of unique. It wasn't created similar to make applications like a lot of other languages were. So for instance, if you think of C++ or C# or Java or things like that, and incidentally, Java is nothing to do with JavaScript. The only connection they have is that JavaScript can actually launch a Java applet, but apart from that, they're not connected as two languages at all. But the interactivity, like I was saying, of the page is really all driven by JavaScript. And so because it was created only for websites and web pages, you'll find that JavaScript as a language doesn't have a lot of the things that maybe you might expect. You can't create an app with JavaScript. There's no app control or app framework really for JavaScript. It has to sit inside HTML for the actual application to be displayed inside a browser. And so because of that, JavaScript doesn't have some of the controls that some other languages have. A lot of other languages have file I/O and access to devices and things like that, whereas JavaScript doesn't have any of that access or behavior or control to get to your computer. And some of that is just for security, and some of that is just because it doesn't need it. So if you look at JavaScript as a language, some of the things like you want to read and write files, or you want to do I/O, or you want to access a USB or a webcam or things like that, well, it's not there. So JavaScript doesn't do things like that. It just wasn't designed for it. Now, it has progressed some, and we do see JavaScript being used in server-side pages. So it can be used for in the cases of the framework where that a website runs on the server, it can be used for Node.js, for instance, on the server, where it's running the entire website. So we're not going to be diving into that though. We're going to be looking at JavaScript in the context of the browser. So it's going to be running locally. So to do that, let's go over a few of the tools that we're going to be using. I'm going to be using Sublime for my text editor. So JavaScript lets you edit content basically in HTML. You can use just any text editor. I'm on a Mac. You don't need to be. So you can dive in and start using whatever text editor you like, as long as you can save files. So there might be some platforms such as an iPad will not work because you don't have a text editor and you don't have a file system, similar to a lot of other computers. So you need a laptop, Mac, PC, either of those is fine, and you'll need the kind of like latest version of some text editor and latest version of the browser, sorry, that you'll want to use for that. So get yourself set up with an editor. Like I said, I'm using Sublime. You don't have to use that, but it does help a lot because it will speed up my editing and help me with any mistakes that I might make. So it has a bunch of kind of like autocomplete and syntax checking. So if you haven't used it before, check it out. It's a great editor. But you know, Notepad or even any other text editor will work just fine. For instance, here, if I'm in Sublime, I've started a new file called basic.html. Well, I can just type HTML here and press tab, and I get the initial kind of like HTML framework for my first HTML file without having to type it all or remember how to do that or go and find it. So I can go off and start writing my HTML pretty much straight away. So I'm going to be using Chrome. Make sure you got the latest version up to date. It's always good to be working with the latest tools. So pretty much that's all we'll need is Chrome and a text editor for this. I'm going to be using the inspector inside Chrome. From here you can see you can go into, I'm on the Google site right now, but I can go into the console area. And from here I can actually work with my JavaScript code. So I can actually type JavaScript here. 3 plus 3, and it'll tell me answers, so just sort of basic code, but we'll go into that in a bit more detail. And I can also look at the source files that we're going to write in JavaScript, and I'll be able to put debug breakpoints and inspect what's happening in the code as it runs. So we'll look at this a little bit more as we go, but make sure you got that set up. So the way I got to this screen here is I right-clicked and I said inspect to get the inspector to come up. One other way to get to that is click this button up here and more tools and developer tools. So that'll bring up the developer tools, and that just hit it because I was already showing it. So get yourself all set up and join me in the next lesson where we'll start going over some basic JavaScript.